The Powerball jackpot rose to $1 billion this morning after no winner emerged after the drawing last night. It marks the third largest jackpot in U.S. history. However, it has a ways to go to beat the top spot. That belongs to the 2022 prize, which was valued at over $2 billion. However, if you were to win the current pot in New York State and chose an annuity payout, you would eventually take home roughly $500 million. That amount would make you actually wealthier than the richest member of Congress right now, but not by very much. And speaking of that, joining us now, senior columnist for the Daily Beast, Matt Lewis. He's the author of a new book out today entitled Filthy Rich Politicians, The Swamp Creatures, Latte Liberals, and Ruling Class Elites Cashing In on America. So tell us about your book, Matt, and who are you looking at here exactly?
Well, I'm really looking at all of them. The richest politician in America is actually J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois. The richest member of Congress is probably Rick Scott, senator from Florida. Politicians make it hard to know exactly how rich they are. They write the laws and the disclosures, and it's usually a broad range, so we don't know exactly how rich they are. But look, this book is about how the rich get elected and the elected get rich. I think both parts of that equation are important, starting with the fact that rich people tend to get elected. In fact, right now, the average member of Congress, and I'm not talking about president or senator, but just your average House of Representatives member, is something like 12 times richer than the average American household. And that gap has grown in recent decades. And I argue that there's some disconnect between our elected officials and we the people. But I think even more corrosive than that is the other side of the equation, which is the fact that once people get elected, they almost always get richer. And I think that, you know, if you talk about how the game is rigged, I think there is a sense out there that our politicians are using their position to feather their nest. And I think that is undermining trust in elected officials and in liberal democracy. And I think it's a problem.
So Matt, when I served, I mean, most members that I knew in the House were like me. I mean, I came to Congress with a couple of hound dogs and a Buick Skylark with 3 tires on it. Didn't have a whole lot of money, but everybody I served with, not everybody, but most of the people I served with, you know, didn't have a whole lot of money. They're very, very middle-class background. When did this change?
It has been going on for about 3 or 4 decades when it has really, I think, kind of reached the level that we're at now, Joe. Again, we've always had rich presidents. You know, George Washington was rich, obviously. FDR, Theodore Roosevelt, the Kennedys. That's not a new thing. What is new is that the average member of the House of Representatives, and this is the lower chamber, right? It's what Madison wanted to be, you know, something of a deliberative body that represented the people, that was the closest to the American people. The average member of Congress, I think it was in 2014, became a millionaire. And so I think that the gap has widened. And in the last 4 decades, the average member of Congress has something like doubled their net worth, while the rest of us are kind of treading water or maybe even going backwards in some cases.
So, Matt, I guess the question, and you just alluded to this, is does it matter? Does it matter that rich people are elected to office? You mentioned FDR, JFK is often cited, George H.W. Bush. They all come from very wealthy families and did good things for people. So in your analysis, as you wrote this book, does the candidate or the politician's wealth impact the way they govern?
I definitely think that our experience impacts our worldview. I don't begrudge rich people, And honestly, if I were super rich, I'd probably be on a beach drinking a pina colada. So part of me admires the fact that people want to go to Washington and serve their country. If they're wealthy, I think there are some problems, right? There's what I call the transitive property of expertise. People think that because they were successful in business that they can automatically be good politicians. I think if you're super wealthy, if you were born with a silver spoon, it's going to be a little hard to connect and to empathize with regular Americans. But to be honest, I think a much more concerning problem is the other part of the book, which is the part where people who get elected tend to also get richer. That is the part that I think is the most corrosive. There was a sense that people are using their position, whether it's insider trading in the stock market, land deals, or whatever the case may be. You know, there was a Pew Research Center study in 2015 that showed that 3/4 of Americans believe that their elected officials are using their position to advance their own self-interest, not ours. And this is in 2015. They described their elected officials as being, quote unquote, selfish. I don't think there's any surprise that just 1 year later, Donald Trump runs for president. And granted, he was allegedly a billionaire, but I think he did a very good job of talking about how the game was rigged, the swamp needed to be drained, and I do think there's a reason why that resonated.
So Matt, it sounds like a lot of your concern here is how politicians are using their job to get richer. Do you have any solutions you propose in the book? I mean, are you suggesting people should not be able to trade stock if they're in Congress, which a lot are supporting? Are there other policy proposals you think would help solve this?
Absolutely. And so that is the first one, right? Since 2012, it's been illegal to engage in insider trading in Congress, but it's impossible to police. And there are a lot of examples I could cite that look very swampy, very sketchy. And so one of the things I propose is simply to ban individual stock trading for members of Congress. You could still own mutual funds, but I think if it's not too much to ask if you want to serve your country.
Why wouldn't they do that, Matt? I've never understood this. Why not the ban? It makes too much sense.
That's why, Joe. It makes too much sense. You know what's funny is now almost everybody is in favor of this, and yet it doesn't happen. When I was writing this book, I got about 6 months out, and I started to get a little worried. They're actually going to do it. They're going to ban stock trading, which would be great for the country, bad for my book. And then I realized, oh, no, they'll never actually do it. Everyone says they're for it, but there's always a reason they don't.
The new book is entitled Filthy Rich Politicians, Swamp Creatures, Latte Liberals, and Ruling Class Elites Cashing In on America. Matt Lewis, thank you very much for coming on this morning, and congratulations on the book.